Hey, peace and blessings, everybody. It's your brother Sorry back with yet another one. As always, peace to the ancestors. Appreciate y'all contributions and the examples that were set in the paths that were laid. Peace to the true and living. Who is the true and living? If you are following any of this material, from a lot of the True Master material to the Electric Soul to Ether Illustrated, you must be the true and living. Nice to meet you. So on this one, I appreciate y'all for hanging out with me today. We're gonna go over interesting piece. We're gonna kind of go over, let's say, we're gonna kind of get back into the touching into the realm of Judaism, the Kabbalistic kind of flavor of Judaism. I know when you get into that, over the decades and decades and years of time, you know, that's a well-developed aspect of that particular community, Judaic community and everything like that. They've developed that a lot. A lot of stuff came out of the Middle Ages and everything like that. Similarly to how in the Middle Ages and everything like that, you had a lot of Sufis and polymaths to develop certain spiritual aspects of the Quran. So you have a lot of interplay in the Middle Ages. Today we're going to talk about, let's see, some of the work of a particular Kabbalist, a particular school of thought as far as Kabbalah is concerned. Now we know, we talked about this previously, the tree of life concept that's coming out of the Temple of Kom Ombo in Egypt and everything like that. So it has a long history prior to the whole, I don't know, introduction into Judaism, however it may go or what have you. But this is it's an interesting piece, this perspective and everything like that. We're going to get into some of the perspective of Isaac Luria, right? Isaac Luria is a, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to misquote it, let me see here. Okay. Yeah, so he's born in Jerusalem. I think his mother's Sephardic and his father is an Ashkenazi. So, you know, just kind of shouting him out as far as, you know, his background, what have you. Very, very influential Kabbalistic teacher. Let's see here. Also known as the Ari, the Lion, was 16th century Jewish mystic whose teachings revolutionized Kabbalah. He was born in Jerusalem, raised in Egypt, and later moved to Safed, where he developed his mystical system. His ideas included the concept of Tzimtzum, divine contraction. We're going to get into some of that. Were primarily disseminated by his disciples, most notably Chaim Vital. Vital is the guy that wrote down a lot of his stuff. I think, well, prior to him passing, but he was the one that kind of put it out after he passed and everything like that. If you read about Luria, he's a clairvoyant. He has a lot of, it's as it says here, his mystical awakening happens around age 22. Luria began to focus intently on the study of the Zohar, the primary work of the Kabbalah, and a life of a recluse. He spent 7 years in seclusion near the Nile, meditating and studying Kabbalah. During this time, he claimed to have encountered with the prophet Elijah, who revealed divine secrets to him. So if you get into his story, he's like a clairvoyant, and he has visions and different things of that nature. He has a interesting story. But getting into this, so when we start getting into this, before we get into this, right, let me see here. I want to contrast this with Gnostic Christianity, right? So I'm gonna read this. This is kind of like a little breakdown, just something off the internet or whatever about Gnostic Christianity, give you a kind of like a baseline, and then we'll get into some Luria's stuff or whatever case may be. Okay, and we're going to get into Sophia, all right? In Gnosticism, Sophia, Greek for wisdom, is a central figure representing divine wisdom, the divine feminine in the human soul, right? The human soul, that's a major part of the punchline, whose fall from the divine realm of the pleroma fullness, right? Fullness. You see what I'm saying? So we're going to get into that. Led to the creation of the material world. She is an aeon. So when you get into Gnostic Christianity, you don't just have like beings. You got beings that are whole dimensions unto themselves, like Barbello and Sophia. It's not just like a person. You see what I'm saying? She is an aeon, a divine being who improperly conceived a flaw being known as the demiurge or Yaldabaoth, who then created the material world, right? In another video, we liken Yaldabaoth or the demiurge to the ego, right? Because we're talking about the soul, Sophia as the soul. In a lot of cases, to make this practical, it helps if we don't always take it literal. There may be a literal component to it or something more literal as far as a component to it. But if we take it from a symbolic perspective or whatever, Sophia being the soul, the demiurge being the ego, you see what I'm saying? Let's see here. According to Gnostic myth, humanity's salvation requires acquiring gnosis, knowledge to help Sophia, and by extension, the human soul be restored to the divine. So it's about a restoration process. It's about reuniting the soul or Sophia with the pleroma, right? A divine emanation. Sophia is an aeon, a divine entity emanating from the Godhead, and is considered the highest feminine aspect of the divine, the cause of the material world. In her desire to know the Father, she acted without her male partner, resulting in birth of a flawed, ignorant creature called the demiurge. The demiurge created the material world, which is seen as flawed and inferior. Okay, the fall. Sophia is often depicted as falling from the pleroma, like falling from heaven or falling from. Remember how we talk about this is the multiplicity. This is a level of multiplicity that we're on. But when we get to a certain place, God is one. So when we get to a certain place, the multiplicity disappears. You see what I'm saying? The fall. Sophia is often depicted as falling from the pleroma, the Gnostic heaven, into the material world because of her mistake. The fall trapped her spirit within the material realm. So it's her falling, the soul falling, descending into matter or whatever, and being encapsulated by matter and everything like that. And the filter, like how we talked about on previous videos, being the ego. So the Sophia is often depicted as falling from the pleroma in the Gnostic heaven. This fall trapped her spirit within the material realm, and parts of her divinity were scattered throughout the cosmos, right? So the parts of her divinity that were scattered, these are the souls of men and everything like that, all right? And that's where, Amun, the hidden one, and all that comes in to play in certain parts, the hidden God or whatever case may be. That's how that comes into play in some of your Gnostic stories, however it may go. But let's get back to Isaac Luria and the Lurianic Kabbalah, right? So that's Gnostic Christianity and everything like that. Talking about the demiurge, talking about Sophia and the various other entities or whatever, that precede Sophia, but Sophia being emblematic of the soul and everything like that. Okay, so for our purposes, we're going to filter a lot of the stuff, the framework of the Lurianic Kabbalah, what it's basically talking about, this repair, what it's talking about, Tikkun. That's kind of one of the main focuses that we're going to get into. And we're going to filter that through the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop, this framework that we've arrived at. All right, so let's see here. Introduction, 16th century teachings of Isaac Luria, the Ari, collectively known as Lurianic Kabbalah, represents a foundational and radical reconstruction of Jewish mystical thought. This system, developed in Safed, provided a comprehensive account of creation characterized by a universal drama centered on a primordial catastrophe. So it's going to talk about the story of the shells. Now, pay close attention when we do get into the story of the spheres and the shattering of the spheres and this whole story of creation and everything like that. Make the correlation in your mind about what we talked about when we talked about neutral centers and all that, and the discharge from counter space into this side in the formation of matter. Remember we talked about prana, newts, how Afro Uno, we read the little section, Afro Uno talked about brain newts and everything like that. And I was telling you about how he was talking about how they melt down and they form reason and everything like that. I was talking about how the melting down is more of what do you call it? Like a sublimation. You see what I'm saying? It's more of a sublimation or a in sort of a discharge on this side of things or whatever. We kind of went over that. Okay, so while historically framed within a theological context, Lurianic cosmology offers a remarkably sophisticated model for understanding cosmic origins, energetic dissipation, and the active role of consciousness in systematic restoration. So they get into this, or whatever case may be, the active role of consciousness in systematic restoration or what have you. So this is kind of similar to how we were talking about karma and all that stuff like that or whatever. They're not calling it that, but that's kind of a similar thing or whatever case may be. So this report suggests to establish a framework of conceptual synthesis by filtering the core Lurianic doctrines: Tzimtzum, the contraction, Shevirat HaKelim, shattering of the vessels, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing things, and Tikkun, repair, through the lens of modern theoretical esoteric physics, specifically utilizing the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop and the reflection principle. This approach treats the Kabbalistic mythos not as a symbolic allegory alone, because what it's being treated as is a symbolic allegory. We're going to see how that mirrors what we just read about the descent of the soul into matter and this whole thing with Sophia. It's very similar to that. It's telling a very similar thing, but as a pre-scientific description of informational and energetic dynamics at the cosmic and individual levels, because this is just like the feedback loop that we're talking about or whatever case may be. It operates on an individual level as far as a person, but it also operates on a cosmic level and on a societal level and all of that. So the justification for this synthesis lies in the unique nature of Lurianism itself, unlike earlier, more contemplative schemes of Kabbalah, which primarily focused on the static emanations of the divine, such as the schema of Moses Cordovera. Luria introduced a dynamic action-oriented mandate. So he's basically saying you have to provide input into the you have to provide input, and then there's a feedback loop. He didn't call it a feedback loop, but that's basically what he's describing. Action-oriented mandate. The entire universe is predicated on the need for human participation. Human participation. You have to do something, and when you do something, that's impact into the feedback loop. So the entire universe is predicated on the need for human participation to rectify cosmic chaos. To rectify cosmic chaos. So he's describing the same thing we're talking about. This particular participatory mandate, where human ethical and conscious actions directly impact the state of existence, he's describing karma. The human ethical and conscious actions directly impact the state of existence, establishes a necessary input-output mechanism essential for modeling via a feedback loop paradigm. So he's basically, without calling it a feedback loop, he's talking about the same thing we're talking about. Because remember, we said in previous videos, karma is a part of this feedback loop. It's a manifestation of the feedback loop, right? So formal introduction of the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop and the reflection principle. The Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop is posited as the underlying non-local medium that facilitates information and energy exchange across all levels of reality. Basically the ether, bridging consciousness and the physical cosmos. The Bio-Aetheric field acts as the primary informational matrix correlating directly to the metaphysical space of the Lurianic emanation. Because remember, we said previously on all the numerous videos that we've done, we said that Einstein's physics don't work very well with stuff like this. But if you go to Tesla's physics, it works perfectly. You see what I'm saying? Because Tesla's physics is based on the metaphysics of Swami Vivekananda. So it's based on Vedic metaphysics. But the thing about it is we can't call it pseudo because Tesla got so many patents. So the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop describes the dynamic exchange between consciousness and the Bio-Aetheric field. Conscious intent, emotional states, and ethical or unethical actions serve as input signal, generating specific vibratory frequencies or resonance within the Bio-Aetheric field. So the things you do, in True Master we call it the language of situations, right? The field processes this modulation and the resulting state of coherence or entropy is then projected outward, experienced as the external manifested reality output. So basically, the reality that you experience or whatever, we have other videos where we're taking random occurrences, mundane stuff, going to the gas station, you know what I'm saying, putting some air in your tire, something like that, and doing a interpretation on that in a similar fashion that you would interpret a dream, and coming out with a coherent, discernible meaning that actually does apply to a situation a person's life is going on. That's kind of like an example of the feedback. So the things that we experience or whatever in the situations that we go through, they're a feedback loop from other situations and other psychological trauma, other things that we thinking and feeling. It's a feedback loop from the blueprint, or the soul as we've been calling it, to the flesh and blood individual having the experience. Go back and look at the video, principle ego and the agent. You see what I'm saying? It breaks it down a lot simpler. This process is governed by the reflection principle, which asserts that the coherence level of the external manifested world, the totality of our collective experience, is a precise observable mirror of the underlying coherence or fragmentation within the individual and collective Bio-Aetheric feedback loop. Basically, how you feel about other people is a mirror into how you feel about yourself, basically, in the long and short of it. Consequently, any observed global disharmony or local suffering is viewed not as a random event. There are no such thing as random events, but as a direct reflection or underlying field contamination, right? So the things that you experience, the things that you observe, because you're the observer, if you observe them, they have a meaning, because in the experiential, we would say everything that you give your attention to, anything that you give your attention to is a symbol. So that's that. The cosmological architecture of Lurianic Kabbalah. So let's kind of get into this, and keep in your mind that cross-referencing with Gnostic Christianity we did earlier, the Lurianic narrative begins not with creation ex nihilo, nothing, like it's just nothingness. You see what they mean? Creation ex nihilo, nothing, and then God snaps his fingers and then everything comes. But with a description of the primal necessity of limiting the infinite, setting the stage for the dramatic failure that defines the current state of the cosmos. So what he's saying, a lot of us that kind of study certain schools of thought, we kind of understand the concept of God like you can't add to it, for where would you get it from? You can't take away from it, because where would you put it? That's out of, I learned that in the WAPU. You see what I'm saying? That's the concept of the all. So that's kind of what the absolute reality is. It's all. So that's kind of what I think that's kind of what he's alluding to. Oh, something closer into that. Okay, so this is. Okay, so this is my crude drawing of the tree, right? The tree of life, and then when you get up here by Kether or whatever case may be, you get these three concentric rings right here. You get Ein Sof or Ein Sof, and then Ein, or whatever case may be. So these are these boundless expanses that he's talking about in that description and everything like that. But they have to be encapsulated. Now we know when we've had the conversation about fixity and encapsulation and all that, or whatever case may be, that ties into Satuk, that ties into that's Capricorn, Satuk, that's all those Saturnalian type energies or whatever case may be. So we're gonna kind of get into that. That also ties into the idea of a flesh and blood body or whatever case may be. It's similar to what they're talking about in Gnostic Christianity, the descent of the soul into matter or whatever case may be. It gets into that type notion or whatever case may be. You're taking something that's boundless and putting bounds around it. You see what I'm saying? That's basically what he's describing. Tzimtzum, Tzim, Tzum, the primal contraction and vacated void, field initialization. Creation in Lurianic terms begins with an ontological paradox. Before all existence, the infinite Godhead, Ein Sof, what we talked about. Let's see here. Ein Sof, the one right there, if you can see it. You see what I'm saying? Let's see here. Okay, so with the boundless unified field, Ein Sof, furthermore, around the void remained the Rishimu, a residual trace or impression of the infinite. This Rishimu functions as the pre-programmed informational template, or the maximum latent energy density encoding the ultimate potential of coherence within the newly initialized bio-etheric field. Hold on one second. I think I skipped too far ahead. Okay, so here we go. Okay. Creation in Lurianic terms begins with the ontological paradox before all existence. The infinite Godhead, Ein Sof, meaning without end or infinite, was omnipresent. All right, to that, like similar to the concept of God Almighty, to allow the possibility of finite defined existence. The Ein Sof performed an act of self-contraction known as Tzimtzum. This radical withdrawal inaugurated metaphysical space, creating the Halal Ha-Punai, the vacated void. All right, so basically it encapsulated a portion of space or whatever and created a section of finite space out of the infinite. In the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop framework, Tzimtzum is modeled as the field initialization event. It establishes the fundamental boundary conditions, a localized, defined energetic system. The Bio-Aetheric field is created within the boundless universal field, Ein Sof. Furthermore, around the void remain the Rishimu, a residual trace or impression of the infinite. The Rishimu functions as the pre-programmed informational template, or the maximum latent energy density encoding the ultimate potential of coherence within the newly initialized Bio-Aetheric field. It defines the goal state toward which the entire process of reification must strive. Okay, so this is the fragmentation of the spheres, right? Shevirat HaKelim, catastrophic energetic overflow, right? So following Tzimtzum, a beam of divine light was sent into the vacated void. So it encapsulates a space around itself, around a portion of itself or whatever. And then the divine light is sent into that space. Was sent into the vacated void to initiate the actual act of creation, channeled through the 10 primordial vessels known as the Sephiroth. So, like we said before, boom, these are your 10 primordial vessels, or my crude drawing of them. You feel me? Okay, let's see. The vessels could not withstand the powerful current and broke apart. The catastrophe introduced systematic disharmony and exile through divinity, resulting in the existence known as Olam Ha-Toho, like in the beginning, Toho and Boho, the world of Toho, chaos. So the divine light comes down into the spheres. The lower spheres can't contain them or whatever. So these are the ones that shatter or what have you. So let's get into it. Boom, boom, boom. All right. From a technical perspective, Shevirat HaKelim is understood as the primal decoherence event. The vessels represented a container model that failed due to a fundamental mismatch between the overwhelming power of the input energy, divine light, and the structural rigidity, the Kelim. Okay, so basically the masculine principle was too potent for the structure of the feminine principle to be able to maintain it, basically. This system failure reveals that coherence, defined as the harmonious integration of energy and structure, is the limiting factor, not mere material capacity. This event resulted in systematic entropy and breakdown of orderly energetic flow. Now that's interesting, because remember when we talked about systems, this is something totally different, but we were talking about systems of the right hand and left hand path. We were talking about the left hand path systems, high risk, high reward, or what have you, and they're dealing with higher levels of voltage, and the body has to be prepared through certain rituals or whatever tradition that the practices come from or whatever, to make the body more coherent, to be able to facilitate this higher level of voltage or whatever in those particular systems. So this is a thing when it talks about coherence and all that or whatever. It's talking about it from the perspective of the 10 primal spheres or whatever case may be. We were speaking of it from a perspective of maybe an initiatory rites or some sort of system of cultivation. So crucially, the shattering was not purely destructive. The shattering pieces of the vessels united with the fragments of the divine light, known as the divine spark, Nitzotzot, which fell into the abyss, embedding themselves within all subsequent physical matter and existence, or what have you. So the chaotic pieces or the disharmonious pieces and everything like that, when we go back into John Keely's stuff and his sympathetic oscillation and everything like that, he talks about that. He talks about chaos or discord is kind of built into the system. You see what I'm saying? Through so many parts kind of working in concert. He was talking about you're going to have some sort of discord is built into the system. Let's see here. Let me see, fell into the abyss. Okay, embedding themselves into all subsequent physical matter in existence. Had the original vessels held, the divine essence would have remained centralized and inaccessible to the lower worlds. The fragmentation, therefore, paradoxically served as a necessary refinement process. It forces a decentralized distribution of divine information packets, making the entire physical universe the site of potential redemption. The bio-etheric field following the Shevirat is thus defined by a state of informational chaos, yet holds the universally distributed seeds of restoration. So that's basically the same thing we read when we read about Gnostic Christianity. So when we go back to this thing about Sophia and we talk about the cause of the world, let's see here. Sophia is depicted as falling from the pleroma, the Gnostic heaven, into the material world. Because of her mistake, the fall trapped her spirit within the material realm, and parts of her divinity were scattered throughout the cosmos. Okay, that sounds damn near like the same thing, or very similar. And I'm not by no means saying that Luria copied that by that's not what I'm saying, because if this is a lighter and 5 different people describe it in five different ways, they're still going to be describing a lighter. So that's all I'm saying. Okay, so let's see. Crucially, the shattering was not purely destructive. Okay, it goes into that, whatever case may be, and also talking about due to the fact that it has the spark of the divine spark in the world or whatever. There's hope for redemption as far as the chaotic pieces. When we get into the story of Sabotage Zevi and stuff like that, and you get into his story or whatever, the guy who says the Messiah in 1666 or whatever, he lived during the time of the Ottoman Empire and stuff like that, and he lived in the Ottoman Empire, and the Sultan called him to his presence and everything like that, and he basically said, convert to Islam or die. And basically he converted to Islam, and a lot of his followers went with him or whatever, but the rationale behind what they were saying was that they consider Islam a kleptocratic religion and everything like that, and he was going into that religion, so-called, in order to purify it or do Tikkun, what we about to describe in a minute. So that's another place where that comes up, because he dealt with Luria's stuff. Luria wasn't alive at the same time as him, but he dealt with a lot of the stuff that Luria laid down. Let me see here. The Klipot, the encapsulation of entropic force, right? So what we liken the Klipot to, when we were talking about the circle of space, matter, and time, and we were talking about the bottom half of the circle, the part of the circle where energy breaks down, where things are torn apart back to their original form and stuff like that. Yeah. On the top, on the upper half, you have Nupu and Zupu alternating. You see them, the equivalent of those forces that they call in Klipot in the model of the circle of space, matter, and time would be what we were calling Zupu. So it's an alternation between Nupu and Zupu on the top half of the circle, and basically on the bottom half of the circle, energy is just ripped apart, or whatever the case may be. All the stray energy from the top goes back to the bottom. So that's a thing. Okay, so the inevitable consequence of Shevirat HaKelim was the creation of the Klipot, singular Klippa, which translates as husks or shells. These Klipot originated from the very act of shattering and subsequently absorbed the scattered Nitzutzut, enshrouding the holy sparks in forces of evil. The encapsulation explains why all creation is comprised of a complex mixture of good and evil. So a lot of the Klipot, that's dealing with like the veil over things, or whatever case may be, that hides its divine nature. That's dealing with disagreeable acts, shadow aspects of the personality of the person and everything like that. All of that stuff kind of ties into that. Okay, so within Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop model, Klipot are identified as energetic field contamination or low coherence or resonant structures. They are metaphysical barriers between the individual and the divine light. So it almost ties into damn similar to what we were talking about, like with the demiurge and the ego, or whatever the case may be. Their function is twofold. They veil the inherent light. We're talking about the ego is the filter and the guardian of the subject-object divide. You see what I'm saying? So it's like the warden, so to speak, in a way. You need your ego. I'm not making it seem like the ego is completely evil or something like that, but it serves its purpose, or what have you. And they are perpetuated by the negative actions of human beings. Selfish actions or intentions serve as continuous input signals that generate vibrational disharmony, right? Because remember, this is basically a karmic type understanding, which accumulates as sticky energetic residue within the local biofield or whatever. So the negative actions, manifest as residue within the human biofield. This field contamination has tangible manifestations presenting in the individual's lived reality as psychological or somatic disorders such as illness, sadness, uncertainty, or chronic unfulfillment. The Klipot produces a effect akin to a curtain placed over a lamp, where the light is always present but obscured by the accumulated dissonance. The interpretation of Klipot as negative resonance signatures provide a definition beyond simple morality. They are the accumulated informational corruption, the localized field damage resulting from disharmonious feedback, right? Basically doing actions with negative karma as a part of it, or whatever, or feeding discordant frequencies into the loop, and the loop having to feed you back a message telling you to stop, or telling you that something's off balance. Situations that correspond with that, basically. Okay, so the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop is a technical framework. The Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop provides a dynamic tool necessary to interpret the operational physics behind the Lurianic imperative of Tikkun. Tikkun is the repair. Defining the bio-etheric field and coherence, the bio-etheric feedback, the bio-etheric field acts as a universal matrix created by, in this framework, Tzimtzum, and fragmented by Shevirat. This field is constantly modulated by consciousness. Coherence within the bio-etheric field refers to the ordered high-frequency flow of information, all right, corresponding directly to the pure light of Netzutzut. Conversely, entropy is the fragmented, disordered flow associated with the low frequency contamination of Klipot. So you got divine light, and then you have this the discordant forces. Okay, in this model, the metaphysical conflict described by Luria, the struggle between chaos and order, is translated into a measurable dynamic between field coherence and system entropy. So basically what we're saying is that if you filter it through the framework of, let's say, like the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop, kind of relying heavily on a lot of Tesla-esque physics and everything like that, a lot of what they talking about in this will boil down to field coherence and systematic entropy within a system and everything like that. It will be a very similar thing to what the Egyptians called ma'at. You see what I'm saying? In previous videos, we talked about within a community, within a tribe or whatever case may be, the priests are basically maintaining and modulating the bio-etheric feedback loop of the collective group. When we got into the Ifa concept or whatever case may be, they're basically talking about the same thing that the Ifa priest is doing and talking about. The Ifa priest is going to the person or whatever. The person is making Ebo and everything like that or whatever. He's throwing the shells or whatever whatever the case may be, and he's finding the deficiencies in that person's field. He's telling them what sacrifices to make. The sacrifices rewrite the karma in the field. We said that. You see what I'm saying? So it's a similar thing. They're not doing anything much different. The interesting contrast in this, when we explore this, the Lurianic Kabbalah kind of cosmology and everything like that, and if you kind of reflect on the current tradition of Judaism or whatever case may be, the priesthood and everything like that, and you kind of contrast that, that's a monotheistic right-hand path system. Ifa is a polytheistic right-hand path system, and they're basically doing a very, very similar thing. So it's an interesting contrast or whatever. So, because I know it's funny, because I know one system may consider the other group of people pagans or something of that nature, but at the same time, if you really examine the engineering behind both of these systems, they're really doing the same thing. You see what I'm saying? But they both dealing with the soul. In the Ifa tradition, they call it the Ori. They're just calling it something different. They have different divisions of the soul. In this, they have different divisions of the soul as well. We're gonna get down, when we get down a little bit further, we're gonna get into that a little bit in a few minutes. So it's actually quite interesting when you contrast these various different systems, when you step out of it from a perspective of religion, because from what we talking about with the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop, the feedback loop is between the soul or the blueprint and the flesh and blood individual, principal ego agent. So whatever religion you got, which is, that's just the software, your chosen software to navigate the mind or to navigate the feedback loop. You know what I'm saying? A religion, regardless of which one you choose, is your chosen software to navigate the feedback loop. The feedback loop is between the soul and the individual. So it's not, and God is one. so this isn't, I don't want nobody to say, oh man, y'all atheist. This ain't nothing atheistic, because if anything, the soul is a fragment, like what we've been talking about in this whole discourse or whatever. Apparently the blueprint or whatever is a fragment from a larger something that collapses back into one. So the idea of God or whatever case may be, that's a given. You see what I'm saying? So it's not nothing atheistic about it, but the archetypal representations, a lot of times, that are attributed to different things or whatever case may be, they're just the software. And sometimes the software is elevated higher than the actual thing that's giving you the feedback. So that was my in video rant, ladies and gentlemen. So Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop mechanics, mechanism of action. The Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop operates as the engine for all conscious interaction with the universe. Input, consciousness and intent. Human thought, emotion, and ethical conduct. Human thought, emotion, and ethical conduct serve as the signal generator. Didn't Brother Saw tell you that was the input into the feedback loop? Intentional, altruistic action produce high coherence input frequencies. Selfish or negative actions produce low coherence input frequencies. Processing field interaction. The signal immediately interacts with the bioetheric field. High coherence input begins the process of dissolving existing field contamination. So when you do good things with good karma, think about high coherence input, replace that with good karma. Low coherence input, replace that with bad karma. Things that cause bad karma. So we can navigate through this language. Okay. It has a potential to dissolve existing field contamination. Clip off. Low coherence input exacerbates contamination or generates new entropic structures, right? So he's basically talking about things that enhance negative feedback in the loop. Output manifestation. The bio-etheric field integrates the input signal and reflects its resultant energetic state back into the source. The reality experienced by the individual or collective, So you mean, so if we live in a country and the country has, an issue with this or that, drugs, crime, whatever the scenario may be, that's a output from the feedback loop that's telling us something else is going wrong, or whatever the case may be. The reality experienced by the individual or collective is the product of this reflection. The cyclical process transforms the grand mythical drama of Tikkun, or repair, into a continuous real-time mechanism of quantum regulation where human beings serve as the essential dynamic regulators of cosmic field stability. The reflection principle, internal state dictates external reality. The reflection principle, let's see here, we've talked about this, is the core causal tenet derived from the synthesis. It states that the external world is a state of, the external world in a state of disharmony is a deterministic projection of the internal state of fragmentation, the degree to which the individual or collective soul is veiled by the clip-off. That's interesting. So the state of the disharmony in the world is the degree in which well, that makes sense. Because we ran into a similar idea when we were talking about the giant wheel, the Kalakakra and stuff like that. We were talking about the top half and the bottom half. The various civilizations have a circle, and on the bottom, in all of those civilizations, we're, as far as our current state right now, day and time or whatever, we're on the bottom. The bottom being the negative half, or whatever case may be. The golden age probably being the top half. Okay, this principle provides a theoretical foundation of the Kabbalistic assertion that moral and ethical actions possess a profound, non-local, acausal, Carl Jung, Wolfgang Pauli, what we've been talking about, non-local and cosmically relevant effect. The process of Tikkun, repair, relies on human actions to influence the restoration of balance. Human actions to influence the restoration of balance. So the same thing that we've been talking about, it's the same thing that they're talking about. They're just using a different language for it. The Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop explains this influence. When an individual performs the act of Tikkun, they introduce a high coherence input signal that locally disrupts the low coherence resonance of clip-op. So they basically healing the world when they do good stuff. When they do good actions, they basically contribute to the overall karma of the world. Because the bio-etheric field is intrinsically non-local, this localized rectification propagates across the system, contributing incrementally to the global repair program, Tikkun Olam. So basically what Brother Asar was telling you, what you do as an individual does matter. You see what I'm saying? Basically what they're saying is that when an individual does something good, or whatever case may be, or does certain acts in accordance with a certain frequency, or whatever case may be, it helps to contribute to the overall frequency of the world. It diminishes the clip-optic energy in the world, period. So therefore, spiritual healing, often manifesting as physical wellness and emotional certainty, is achieved by purifying the local biofield, removing the veils, clip-off, to allow the innate divine light to become manifest. The reflection principle assures that the outcome of this inner energetic work will be mirrored precisely in the external environment. Okay, synthesis. Okay, mapping Lurianic mechanisms onto the bio-etheric model. The systematic filtering of Lurianic cosmology through the bio-etheric feedback loop confirms a isomorphic relationship between the mystical doctrine and the theoretical energetic framework. So when we examine what the Kabbalah is saying and what the Lurianic teachings are actually saying, or what have you, he's not calling it a feedback loop. He's describing it in totally other language or whatever. He's using Tzimtzum, Shevirat, he's using different terminology and everything like that, or what have you, to describe what he's talking about. But if you look at what he's talking about, he's describing a feedback loop. He's doing the same thing that the Ifa priest is doing. You see what I'm saying? He's doing the same thing. He's talking about karma. He's just not calling it karma. You see what I'm saying? So let's see here. Cosmic mapping, Tzimtzum, Shevirat, and residuance. Tzimtzum establishes the fundamental tension within the energetic system, the necessary presence of a finite observable bio-etheric field carved out of the infinite Ein Sof. This defines the system's boundary conditions. So basically you're taking God Almighty, the infinite expanse. You see what I'm saying? Can't add to it, because where would you get it from? Can't take away from it, because where would you put it? And then it's being encapsulated into some sort, a portion of itself being contained. Shevirat HaKelim is the signature event of primal decoherence. It represents the critical failure mode of the original creation scheme, leading to the maximum systemic entropy and the breakdown of the structured energy flow when the spheres shatter. You see what I'm saying? What he's talking about, the divine light is too much and they can't take it. Olam Ha-Toho, chaos, is the resulting state, the immediate chaotic and unstable energetic configuration of the bio-etheric field following the rupture. The stage dictates that all subsequent existence must occur under conditions of structural imperfection and latent disorder. Because remember, we talked about that when we were on the video about Plato's theory of forms, or whatever case maybe. We were talking about that, and we've said that a few times in reference to the blueprint, like how in Plato's theory of forms, you got the perfect horse, or the form of the perfect horse, and then you got the imperfect actual horse on the physical level and stuff like that. So that's kind of a similar thing. We were saying that a lot of these experiences, because the fabric of reality is constantly trying to heal itself. So a lot of these experiences that we experience in our lives, or whatever, these situations that are generated, like how what we were talking about earlier, the language of situations and all that, these situations that are generated and everything like that, it's the differential between that perfection and where we are. So energy and information, Nitzat and Klipop, the scattering of energy and structure following the Shevirat introduces the primary dynamic entity of repair. The divine spark, Nitzat, are high coherence informational data packets. They are the latent potential for perfect order, embedded as fragments of the divine light within the matter of the world of chaos, right? Pieces of the divine light, similar to when we were talking about Sophia and her divine light coming down and being fragmented and spreading across the world. The process of elevating the sparks is the mechanism of restoring these coherent packets to the global systemic order. The husks, the klipot, are the energetic barriers and low coherence field contamination resulting from the original system failure and maintained by the subsequent disharmonious human input. They act as a signal degradation or informational corruption, actively concealing the inner coherence of the Netzotzot. So the Klipot act as, I don't know, they act as, they're kind of shielding the light from being visible. It's, I don't know, forces of entropy. All the forces on the circle of space, matter, and time, I would say all the forces from the bottom half. They're a manifestation of the forces on the bottom half, because all the stray energy goes back to the bottom half and everything like that. So the existential necessity of Klipot. The synthesis reveals that the presence of Klipot is not a mere theological complication, but a structural necessity for the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop to function as a restorative loop. If the divine light had remained purely centralized, the state of Tohu before the shattering completed its distribution, human action would be irrelevant. The encapsulation of the coherent Nitzot within the low coherence matrix of the Klipot introduces the element of resistance, duality, and choice. Okay, this because I guess he's saying that humans will not have access to the divine light due to the fact that the sphere is shattered and everything like that. It's distributed throughout the world, and you actually have access to salvation, however it may go. Similar to the thing with Sophia in Gnostic Christianity. Okay, so this structure mandates that human consciousness must overcome this resistance to effect repair. The structure of Klipot provides the necessary variable, the spiritual grit that elevates human efforts to a cosmic level. Remember why we were saying you understand principles through rigors. So something of that nature. Transforming a passive entity into an active co-creator, responsible for restructuring the informational architecture of existence from chaos to rectification, right? So basically your actions, the things that you do, or whatever case may be, this is their way of saying there's a feedback loop. It affects humanity, it affects society in one way or another. Yeah. Okay, Tikkun as the conscious recalibration protocol. Tikkun repair is the programmatic objective of Lurianic Kabbalah, the mandated process of gathering the scattered sparks and restoring cosmic harmony. In the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop paradigm, Tikkun is the conscious recalibration protocol. It is the active, high coherence input initiated by human intent and ethical action that begins the positive feedback cycle, moving the field state from olam ha-toho, or chaos, moving the state of the field from a chaotic state or an incoherent state toward the optimal state of olam ha-tikkun, the world of recalibration, so rectification. So this goes back into what we were talking about. I'm going to do another piece at some point about the Bio-Aetheric governance and all that. So we're going to go back and we're going to get into all that, how ancient civilizations basically use a similar idea as far as karma, as far as all this stuff or whatever, as far as governing their civilization. The priesthood modulated the feedback loop of the society all together. So the following table formally, let's see, synthesize the key Lurianic concepts. Okay, so we got Ein Sof, the infinite unknowable Godhead before creation, the unmanifested unified universal field. That's how we look at it from the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop. Absolute potential energy, source of all energetic coherence, something like the ether, something akin to the ether. Tzimtzum, the act of divine self-contraction to make space or for creation. Okay, in the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop, field contraction, event created localized finite space-time. The Bio-Aetheric field defines the boundary conditions for existence. Shevirat HaKelim, the shattering of the vessels. Sephiroth, in the world of chaos. Tohu, let's see, energetic overload and the systematic field fragmentation. So that's how it will look in the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop. System overload is too much. The light is too much for these spheres to be able to deal with. Origin of universal disharmony and disorder. Okay, Nitzutzut, scattering fragments of divine light, energy captured in creation. Okay, so high coherence information packets trapped in low coherence field residue, right? So high coherence energy trapped in basically low coherence vessels. The vessels can't contain them because the vessels are of the same quality or of the energy being projected. Potential for repair and source of conscious vitality. Klipot, husks, or shells surrounded the Netzutzut, forces of concealment, evil energetic barriers, regions of negative resonance, accumulated field contamination, manifestation of selfish or disharmonious feedback, low coherence. So Tikkun, the mandated process of repair and rectification. The Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop, driven by conscious intent action, the dynamic mechanism for restoring coherence, order from chaos. All right. So one of the last parts we're going to get into before we kind of finish up here. Let's see here. This is going to be the various... this is going to be the various parts. The following table formally synchronize the key. Okay, the human soul as active agent in the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop or Tikkun process. So this is going to kind of go into the various layers because this is a common thing that we've been getting. Anytime we talk about the deceased, anytime we talk about the soul, we talk about a person dying, there's a risk of them fragmenting into different parts. You see what I'm saying? In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, they talk about that. In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they talk about that. In this Lurianic Kabbalah, they talk about the various different layers of the human, or whatever, of the person, the soul, the spirit, in this case, the ruach, the nafesh, you know what I'm saying? The various parts of the person's constitution, or whatever case may be. Remember when we did the bio-etheric engineering of homicide and everything like that, we were talking about how certain ways that people pass on, or whatever case may be, can increase the likelihood that they'll be fragmented after death. People, let's say a quick, painless death, or whatever case may be, that contributes to a person's wholeness, the wholeness of their constitution after they pass on and everything like that. So we've had conversations about things like that. But in this particular tradition, these are the different divisions of the human soul. The human soul as the active agent in the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop and Tikkun process. Lurianic Kabbalah assigns paramount importance to the human being, who contains the mechanism for both contributing to cosmic chaos and achieving cosmic repair, right? The soul, structured in 5 ascending layers, functions as a sophisticated cognitive and energetic interface for activating the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop. The soul, structured in 5 ascending layers, functions as a sophisticated cognitive and energetic interface for activating the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop. So here it's saying that the soul is the interface for the feedback loop, kind of like what we've been talking about. So multi-phase human interface. And remember we talked about what a phase is. A phase is like the transmission on phases are like the parts of the transmission on the car, drive, neutral, reverse, or whatever, to super oversimplify it. You see what I'm saying? A phase would also be like the different houses in the zodiac wheel, or whatever case may be. You know what I mean? So I mean, it's just different ways you can kind of look at it. I'm trying to oversimplify it because it's more complicated explanations for that. So classical Kabbalah identifies 5 primary levels of the soul: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, and yechida. These layers represent a progressive gradient of connection, ranging from the purely physical to the most refined divine essence, defining the mechanism by which the individual bio-etheric feedback loop operates. The lower layers, receptors and emitters: nefesh, physical anchor. So this anchors a person to the physical capacitor or battery, as we've been calling the human body. The lowest layer, representing the animating principle of the physical body, basic vital instincts, and the sensory input interface. In the bio-etheric feedback loop, nefesh acts as the primary receptor, receiving and sensing the grossest reflected field data, the physical manifestation of klipot, such as illness or physical malaise, right? So this receives the grossest level of data and everything like that. Remember how we were talking about Dolores Cannon and her stuff, or whatever case may be. A sickness is a message coming from the feedback loop, or whatever case may be. 9 times out of 10, the illness is going to symbolize some aspect of what the actual problem is, the psychological trauma or whatever. It's going to be symbolically encoded within the illness. Ruach, emotional engine, referred to as the spirit or the middle pillar. Ruach vitalizes the emotions and serves as the force that sparks within a person. This layer is the primary emitter of the individual's resonance signature, right? Emotional coherence and turbulence generated by the Ruach is the immediate energetic input signal that drives the bio-etheric feedback loop, either purifying or contaminating the local field environment. Right, so this would be, I guess, the seat of the aura, however it may go, or the biofield, however it may go. The higher levels, modulator and source. Neshama, cognitive modulator. This layer embodies the vitality of the intellect and spiritual awareness, recognized as the highest and purest level of the individual soul. Neshama is the critical bridge for the intentional Tikkun. It's a critical bridge for the intentional repairing. Rav Ashlag taught that consciousness is the single most important element in removing klipot. The neshama functions as the cognitive filter and modulator, allowing the human agent to transcend purely emotional and instinctive reactions, nefesh and ruach, and initiate purposeful, high coherence input. So this is kind of getting closer to the divine mind. You see what I'm saying? So this would get into, I would assume, not to bog this video down with that type of talk, but I'm sure this gets into the whole differentiation when they start getting into the goyim versus the ones with divine spark and all that stuff like that. I'm pretty sure this is where it kind of starts getting into all that, when you start getting into these higher levels of the mind within that tradition and everything like that. I'm not gonna bog this video down with all that, but just kind of letting it be known. Chaya Yachita, pristine source. Chaya signifies the essence of life, while Yachita is the most innermost essence of the soul, regarded as a extension of the divine itself. Yachita serves as the direct connection point to the Rishimu and the Ein Sof. It is, so basically it's a part of the self that connects directly with the ether at large, or the blueprint, or the original source. You see what I'm saying? So it's the same thing that we've been saying in this whole thing. It's saying the same thing or whatever. It's just using a different language to describe it. It is the ultimate source of pristine, high coherence energy required for complete radical rectification of the fragmented field, right? Wow. So, okay. So the structure of the soul functions effectively as the coherence gradient tool. The progressive nature of the soul layers implies a path toward increasing informational purity. The nephesh is entangled with the material world, saturated by klipot. True repair necessitates engaging the intellectual and spiritual awareness of neshama to process and redirect the emotional forces to ruach. So basically, not giving into the animal self. Basically, adopting higher pursuits to develop higher faculties within the individual and everything like that. Straying away from, let's say, like animal and the bestial nature and everything like that. It's dividing the man from his baser nature into his higher levels of self and higher level of soul in order to purify not only his own field, but to purify his community and the world at large. So that's basically what it's talking about. This conscious intervention elevates the individual's Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop signature from a low coherence reactive state generating klipot into an actively restorative system that can successfully access the pure energy of Yachita. Tikkun Olam as global Bio-Aetheric rectification. Okay, so this is that heal the world energy. The cosmic purpose of humanity, therefore, is Tikkun Olam. So the cosmic purpose of humanity, according to this tradition, is to basically heal the world. Peace to the true and living. So it's basically to, heal the rest of humanity through, these acts that would evoke the divine light. You see what I'm saying? Because remember how we said on previous videos, when you do things that have good karma or whatever case may be, you kind of benefit the blueprint. You see what I'm saying? Doing things that have bad karma, or the things that are more beastly and baser or whatever case may be, they damage the blueprint. So much so we got a video where it talks about getting fired when your relationship with the blueprint goes bad. You see what I'm saying? So the repair of the world. This is accomplished through the practical mechanism of elevating the sparks, nitzatzat, every ethical or mindful act, every moment of consciousness focused on altruism, engages with a physical object or experience containing embedded divine sparks. By refining one's interaction with the material world, transforming the mundane into the sacred. Transforming the mundane into the sacred, you mean like going to the gas station, get some air and interpreting that and having a you finding the meaning of life off the strength of interpreting some mundane situation in your life. Yeah. We're attempting to do some of that, transforming the mundane into the sacred. The human agent realizes these sparks from their entropic husk, the klipot. This process relies heavily on consciousness and intent, kavana. The Lurianic doctrine places intentional consciousness as the necessary catalyst for system reversal, the transition from tohu or tikkun, catastrophe or of Shevirat, resulting from overwhelming unconscious power meeting insufficient receptivity. The repair must therefore be conscious, intellectual, and refined. Consciousness driven by Neshima generate consciousness driven by the higher faculties, the higher aspects of the mind, generates the specific high coherence resonance wave needed to crack that shell open and reveal the light within the klipa. You see what I'm saying? This high coherence input signal effectively overcomes the informational noise or low coherence field contamination, right? So basically, it's a similar thing, I would say, to maybe that raising the kundalini or increasing the human's voltage. It's basically describing the same thing that we're talking about, the results of the right or left hand path. You see what I'm saying? The end that both of those paths are actually trying to get to. You see what I'm saying? The right hand path through a more slow and steady way, the left hand path through basically get rich or die trying. So conclusion and prospective integration. Okay, the filtering of the Lurianic Kabbalah through the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop and the reflection principle yields a unified, dynamic, and action-oriented model of reality. So they also have an action-oriented model of reality, similar to how we were talking about. That's why I was saying Asar don't teach manifestation, not because that's not supported in some of the material that we actually run across, because I'm not going to teach you to be lazy, because we have technology already. That's another pull toward laziness or whatever case may be. So that's the last thing you need to hear somebody telling you, just to sit down there and try to manifest whatever you're trying to get or whatever. You got to do something. You see what I'm saying? So we've said that since day one. So an action-oriented model of reality, the Lurianic cosmology describes the genesis of our energetic reality, the Tzimtzum, initialized the system space, bio-etheric field, the Shevirat HaKelim caused the primal fragmentation, maximum field entropy, and the resulting clip-out represent the energetic contamination resulting from this chaos, which is the perpetuated low coherence human actions, right? The beast-like nature. You see what I'm saying? Basically, it's talking about higher aspects of the mind and the lower aspects of the mind, or the spiritual constitution, however it may go. One that's going to be more attracted to beast-like things, and one that's going to be more attracted to higher pursuits, or whatever case may be. It's talking about the world is saturated with this clipothic energy, but it's also the spark, these divine sparks, very similar to what we're talking about in Gnostic Christianity with Sophia. You see what I'm saying? Different language, very similar engineering. We eyeballing the engineering and what they're talking about. Even Ifa, very similar. You see what I'm saying? It's a very similar engineering. You see what I'm saying? Or a very similar breakdown as far as what we're dealing with. Let's see here. The Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop framework provides a mechanism for cosmic rectification in human consciousness, particularly when operating from the higher levels of the soul. Neshima generates high coherence input signals. These signals constitute the act of Tikkun, purifying the localized bio-etheric field by elevating the trapped nitzot and resolving the klipot. The reflection principle assures that the efficacy of this internal energetic work is directly mirrored as order, happiness, and wellness in the external manifested world. Olam Ha Tikkun. Okay, so just kind of, let me see if there's anything we missed. Not really. That's pretty much everything that I wanted to cover on that one. Just wanted to just touch on that a little bit, just kind of contrasting the teachings of Lurianic Kabbalah, or just kind of like a skim, because I know people who are actually involved in that tradition. I know it's a lot more nuanced than that. I just want to kind of give a general breakdown. Again, if you're interested in any particular thought process or system that we break down, go find I'm not going to take nothing away from the people whose system it actually is. Interested in it, go seek out the person whose system it actually is. I'm not trying to give you a how-to on nothing, or like ultra in-depth on it. We on this side, we try to look at the engineering of it, because when we're dealing with the Bio-Aetheric Feedback Loop, from what we're talking about, the blueprint, the principle, the soul, all of that, what we're talking about, the feedback loop is between that and the individual. And I mean, if you want to extend it to, you know, say God or whatever case may be, however it goes, because it's going in that direction as well. But it's a feedback loop between that and the individual. You see what I'm saying? When Grandma was talking to Jesus, you know what I'm saying, told me that this was gonna be like this. She calling it Jesus because that's what she understand. But that's the feedback loop. She understood through her years and years and years of going to church and living life that there was a feedback loop that exists, and she just equated that with her religion and her biblical understanding. You see what I'm saying? Which is nothing wrong with that or whatever. But from the perspective that we coming from, like I said, any religion is more of a software than anything. We're kind of dealing directly from the blueprint to the individual. So as we can see, it's a similar thing with this. You see what I'm saying? It's a similar thing with this. So if you like what you've been hearing, like and subscribe. We got a few more of these to kind of pump out. We just kind of doing our case studies. More to come. Appreciate y'all for checking me out. Peace and blessings. Peace to the gods.